Retirement isn't just about paying the bills, it's about enjoying the life you've worked hard to build. But when it comes to discretionary spending like vacations, holiday gifts, and spur-of-the-moment adventures, even thoughtful clients can struggle to find the right balance. Live and give too much, and you put the plan in jeopardy. Use too little now, and you may miss out on some of life's best moments. So today, we'll talk about how to budget for joy strategically.
Spencer, today we're going to talk about budgeting, one of our life's favorite topics. The reality is budgeting is hard, and living on a budget is hard. And when we think about budgets, we have our core needs, our food, our shelter, our clothing. Then we think about discretionary and even some of those luxury items that we get to participate with. But when we think about those seasons in retirement of how do we actually allocate resources to live and give, sometimes it can be really hard to understand where those resources are going and how to allocate them. So today we want to talk about budgeting for vacations, trips, living and giving. How do we think about that from the outset?
Well, I love the framework that you put together, and we lay that framework where we say, okay, here are our core needs. Here are those things that are kind of that next level where there are our desires. And then there's aspirational elements that we say, okay, well, I don't have to have that, but that would be kind of fun. Kind of those three levels. Now, over that, we lay this framework that talks about being the go-go years, early in retirement, the slow-go years, where we're slowing down typically after a number of years in retirement, and then the no-go years. And so we recognize that with a lot of these desires, that second level, and then even the aspirational elements, that third level, we only have a handful of years to do those, maybe 10 years, maybe 15, maybe fewer years there. So as we think about this, we've got to recognize that sometimes we can't wait until we're 93 to take that trip to Europe if that was an aspirational element. Now, if we surrender that desire and we say, well, I'm just going to use these funds for something else, that's totally fine. But if that was one of those things that we always really wanted to do, there will be a time when that decision is no longer on the table, and we need to recognize that. So I think the key is to begin with a framework for budgeting, like you've talked about, those core needs that really are not going to change all that much other than maybe health care down the road or long-term care down the road, which are two big question marks. But we start with that framework of having those needs and then having that next level of discretionary and then even aspirational spending. And then what we can do, if we have those with clarity, we can start to compare. Because what we don't want to do is make decisions that are just not very well informed. We want to be able to say, okay, am I going to feel like I'm a better steward, make better decisions if I give the $10,000 that I could spend on this trip and I give them to this person or this charitable institution? Well, both could be fantastic decisions, but we need to make sure that we understand if I do the funds here, I might not do them over here. And being able to have a budget that has those three categories can help us begin to grapple with that.
Absolutely. So as folks approach retirement or enter that first season of retirement, what are maybe two often trajectories that they go on?
Well, retirement is a transition. It's a big transition. It's a transition relationally because a lot of the people that you hang out with during your workday, you're not going to be spending as much time with because they're not retiring with you and then hanging out with you at home during, the 9 to 5. So we've got a relational transition there. We've also got a transition of how we spend because a lot of the time that we would spend at work, well, now we have capability of engaging in activities or taking trips. And so there's a change there. So we've got a number of different changes. And as these add up, what happens is for some folks, there's a level of insecurity or there's a level of discomfort that sometimes spending is one of those levers that we look to kind of help us deal with that level of discomfort. I mean, if we're honest, if we're open, about this, and we see folks move through that retirement season in a variety of different ways. So on the one side of things, sometimes folks say, okay, I've got all this time and I don't have these relationships maybe that I was, as consistent with. And so I want to do something. I want to enjoy this. You only live once. So I've got 5-10 years. I'm going to take some big trips or whatever it might be, engage in some activities. Well, these sometimes can be quite different than even what the plan was coming in. Right. It's almost like there's this space that has to be filled, and the void is filled by activities. Mm-hmm. And those activities can be expensive. Mm-hmm. We have seen situations where clients will spend twice as much as they expected coming into retirement, mm-hmm. because now they have all of this time for these activities. And so we have to then redo the plan and say, okay, is this even possible that you can do this, or is it possible for a season? So on the one side of things, sometimes we vastly underestimate mm-hmm. what we will spend those first few years of retirement, and sometimes it's just even helping clients deal with the psychological transition, the emotional transition of being engaged in work and then moving to this new season that we need to walk through. So that's the first type. The other type of folks that sometimes we will encounter are folks that actually everything starts to kind of slow down as they move into retirement. They actually like being at home. Mm-hmm. They don't get out and do quite as many activities. They have a level of rest there, but they start to, because maybe they're more frugal, they start to say, well, do I even need to do these particular things? So they spend less than what was projected, and perhaps they've saved really well over the course of their lives. Mm-hmm. So now we have a situation where we're on this, what we would call a raging green curve, where resources are just projected to grow over time, unless there's living and giving that's done in an intentional way to be able to kind of level off that curve, which there's nothing wrong with continuing to see resources grow. But most folks, if they're open about it, they would say, well, I'd rather do my living and giving now during my lifetime than just, wait and pass it all on to, other folks at the end of life.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So let's shift now and start thinking about how do we actually allocate towards vacation spending as one of those lifestyle levers that we want to put resources to. Mm-hmm. So one way that we can think about this is setting a percentage guideline. Mm-hmm. And this obviously, like you were talking about with the go, slow go, no-go years, mm-hmm. you're not going to say, okay, I'm going to allocate 10% for the next 30 years that's always going to go to vacation. Because when there are no-go years, mm-hmm. if you're not going and you still have 10% allocated there, mm-hmm. then maybe we've overshot. Mm-hmm. Can you talk us through maybe what are some guidelines of how to think through vacation spending?
Well, the best way to go, we would say, is, again, do that budget, look at those core needs, and then layer on those discretionary needs and actually come up with numbers that are specific to your financial plan. Sometimes that could be, you're spending 20% on travel or even more. We have clients that in an annual year, they might spend 30 or 40% on travel, but some of that is they're bringing all of the people that they love with them, and they're doing it only for a couple of years. Yeah. So it's not outside of the context of their financial plan. There is a specificity to it. There are other folks who are also within the financial plan that they're allocating almost nothing there, but they're doing it with intention. Maybe they want to be able to give as much as they can to charitable causes, or to pass on resources to, a loved, an heir that they love, whatever it might be, but doing so with intention. Now, a budgeting textbook, of sorts would say, well, the average American might spend something like 3 to 6% of their annual income on vacation. But again, we've got to lay that on top of the go, slow go, no go kind of framework. And oftentimes we would see clients who are in the go years spend far more than that. Those that in the slow go years, they might or might not spend that much. And then those in the no go years, they're probably not spending anything on vacation. If we layer that and we look at, say, birthdays and Christmas gifts, oftentimes a budgeting textbook would say, maybe plan for something like 1 or 2% here. We see clients go all over the map on this because they may layer in birthday and holiday gifts. They may layer those into the travel that they're doing with family. So the vacation is kind of the gift itself. Mm-hmm. We might see a situation where the flip side happens, where a client's not taking many trips, not doing as much there, but they say, I really want to be able to give $15,000 to each of my heirs on an annual basis. So there's a level of intention there. But if we put that into the financial plan, then it's very easy to say, okay, well, that is an important goal, but it's one of those discretionary elements. It's not as though, it's quite as important, at least for the vast majority of people. It's not as important as, putting food on the table on Thursday night, or paying for those utility bills. But it can be still a secondary, a very important goal that we want to recognize. So those gifts, again, you might say, on an annual basis, financial planning or a budgeting textbook might say, a lot of folks would say 1% to 2% of overall income, gets spent on that. But we see clients all over the map there too. Could be far higher, could be nothing.
Right. Well, and I think, again, this just comes back to that building a robust financial plan. When we're sitting down with clients, if we're going through the financial planning process and they say, hey, I want to budget X, Y, or Z towards annual vacation or towards gifts to my kids, then we put that in the plan and say, hey, look, you can do that. And maybe you can do that and more. And it just continues to give them that flexibility to say, hey, we've got this built in where you're spending $15,000, $20,000 per year on vacation, on travel, on gifts to the kids, and your plan isn't affected. And for some of them, it really gives them that life to be able to say, okay, yes, I do want to do this. For some, it actually doesn't move that needle to really push them to do it. And so I think this is where we really come back and say again and again, we have to look at this within the context of a financial plan. And we have to come back and review and adjust it annually. Because if we're not reviewing and adjusting, if we're just saying, hey, plan looks fine, plan looks fine, plan looks fine, and then some other event happens, well, now we got to readjust and see, okay, is it still sustainable to be able to do this?
Well, and as we put that plan together, we look at sustainability, but we also look at the trade-offs that folks might have. So if it's sustainable and we look at it and say, okay, well, looks like, the core part of the plan the projections would have some kind of hypothetical where you might have $4 or $5 million at the end of life. Would you prefer to explore an alternate plan where maybe the next 5 years you're helping, your daughter with $10,000 to $15,000 a year to help with childcare while she has young kids under the roof? That might be far more impactful than passing on, an extra $100,000 when she is, 69 and you pass away. So looking at that and really grappling with those trade-offs, provided that everything looks good in terms of the sustainability of the plan and making sure that you have, funds for Thursday night's dinner, is something that can be really helpful.
Right. Well, Spencer, thanks for walking us through some of those ideas of how do we actually allocate resources to some of those categories like living and giving. Clients, if you have questions about your budget, if you want to talk us through your spending and how to allocate that over time, we would love to have that conversation with you. As always, feel free to leave comments down below, and we'll see you again next time. Take care. If you like these financial planning videos, please share it with a friend, and if you have questions, go to our website at seriousretirement.com. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can visit our website at seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents. Advisory services offered through Retirement Planning Services, LLC.